I think that there's one important takeaway. That is, you have to start somewhere. If you don't start somewhere, the government is going to decide for you. That process is called intestate. So if you pass away and you don't have a will, guess what? There is a process in the state where you live that the court will designate who that administrator is or who your representative is. So get started. Don't leave it up to somebody else. Even if you have very little bit, it's a foundation that you can always update later.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, a broker dealer member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
Welcome to Money Matters with Chris Hensley, where we spotlight financial literacy issues in the Houston community and beyond. And now your host, Chris Hensley.
Welcome to today's episode of Money Matters podcast, where we dive deep into the waters of finance and come up with pearls of wisdom that keep your pockets full and your mind even fuller. I'm Chris Hensley, and today we're unlocking the secrets of one of life's most daunting tasks, estate planning. Joining us is Adam Zuckerman, a visionary who's transforming how we think about securing our legacies. Adam isn't just an expert, he's a seasoned attorney and the innovative founder of Buried in Work, a platform that's revolutionizing estate planning and end-of-life tasks. Have you ever wondered what happens if you don't plan your estate properly? Or why, even at a young age, it's crucial to start thinking about your legacy? Adam's here to guide us through these murky waters with clarity and insight. And stay tuned till the very end, because Adam will reveal the one common mistake that could jeopardize your future intentions and how to avoid it. You won't want to miss this essential advice that could save you and your loved ones from future headaches. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
When you reached out to me, this is one of my passions. I'm a CES, Certified Estate and Trust Specialist. And so it is an area of my practice that I've found, being 20 years in the business, as people get closer to retirement or post-retirement, this becomes even more important to them. And so this is, estate planning is a topic that's true to our heart here. Let's just dive in and start with, can you describe what led to Buried in Work and how your father's estate influenced your approach to estate planning?
Yeah, it's an innovative and strange story in some ways. My background has taken me from big companies that are Fortune 500, from Anheuser-Busch and Discovery, finance, hedge funds, startups, and whatnot. And when my father was nearing the end of his life, he was at my house, he was actually doing some woodworking in the basement. He said he was tired. And the reality is, when he says that, there's a bit of a red flag, because he had leukemia for quite some time, 6.5 years. Went to the hospital. That was Tuesday. He was checked in on a Thursday, and 12 days later, he passed. So it was a bit of a shock for the family of how quickly everything happened. But yet, in a strange way, we knew for quite some time that this eventuality could happen because he was diagnosed with leukemia. He thought he was organized. We thought he was organized. We being myself, the family, my sister, my mom was still around. And when I delved into what was left in the mess that he left, unfortunately, there was a lot to learn. I took very, very diligent notes of what I was doing to transition the accounts. And I ended up meeting with his financial planner, with my mom's financial planner. And at the end of the conversation, the tidbit that was instilled upon me was, this is the most comprehensive transition I've ever seen in my life. You have to give this to other people. So we tested the water. We spoke to a few other people. And next thing we knew, Buried in Work was born to try and save people the time and the hassle that far too many Americans have to go through. The average estate in the country takes 570 hours of time to administer. And I don't know about you, but I don't typically have 570 hours laying around.
Wow, that's huge, because you shared with us a couple things there, how fast this stuff can happen. That was, would you say, 12 days from the time that we got warning flags, and then the perception that he was organized. He thought he was such financially organized. You guys thought he was financially organized. And it turns out this was one of the most comprehensive transitions that they had seen when you dug deeper into it. You shared with us the 570 hours that sometimes it can take to settle all of this stuff. And I think a lot of times people just see it as these legal documents, and there's so much more, so much more stuff to be done for sure. Let's talk about estate planning in general. Why is estate planning a critical issue for everyone, not just the wealthy? And what are the potential consequences of neglecting this aspect of your financial health?
That's a great question. So the reality is that even if you have no asset, you still have an estate. And there's the old saying in the United States, around the world, there's nothing certain except for death and taxes. And the reality is that's true. We have a population in the country because of the baby boomer where 10,000 Americans are turning 65 every single day. That means that the number of people over 65 by the end of the decade is going to double. We're in a situation where women that are married in the United States on average live their male husbands by an average of 5.8 years. And that means if you look at traditional family values, that there's an entire generation of women, and obviously this is not everybody, always remember to never speak in absolutes, that are going to be on a very steep learning curve at a time in their life where they may not have the resources, the time to focus on it. And it's also a great time of stress and worry. So that's not. And then when you take that on top of things, you look at sandwich generation, where there's 15% of middle-aged adults, that's between 50 or 40 and 59, that are financially supporting both themselves, their children, and their parents. So we are rapidly shifting toward this time period in the country that is all within a broader scope of the largest transition of wealth in human history. $84 trillion in assets is about to shift over the next 20 years. And we have to ask ourselves the question of, if I have nothing, what happens to my estate when I pass away? What impact is it not to me, but rather to my heirs, to my executors, to my family, to my loved ones, to my friends? And if you do have more assets than zero, the same question has to be asked. And the more money you have, the more assets you have, the more places you live, the more people in your life, the more complicated that process is. So we need to look at estate planning not as a legal document, but rather it's a comprehensive process that will leave your family, your heirs, your loved ones, whoever has to step in a position where they can step in and minimize the impact on their lives and maximize the efficiency of the process.
I love it. I love it. That's a lot of very important information you just shared there. The idea that it's not just about those core legal documents. It's a process, and there's lots of other things that are involved in this. You gave the idea of, just if you want to make sure you're leaving your family members, your loved ones in a good spot. If you don't have a plan, there's one out there for you. You just don't know about. Yeah, and you'll find out. You mentioned death and taxes, the two things that we just can't avoid those. Those are going to be there. But putting yourself in a position that you are financially organized, that you're doing this with thought and intention. Really, really good explanation of what people should be thinking about on that. I want to shift a little bit and talk about some of these things that might fall outside of the legal documents, those end-of-life tasks. Could you share some of the innovative approaches your platform uses to simplify estate organization and end-of-life tasks?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So our approach at Buried Work is to leave people in the best position possible. And that means you want to provide your family members with instant access to your most critical information when it's needed most. It means that you want to ensure that your loved ones know exactly what to do in times of incapacity or loss. So estate planning isn't about only when you pass away, but it's everything leading up to that point as well. You talk about trusts as part of the overall package. You talk about wills, and trusts can be structured to take effect before death, after death, or even in the case of incapacitation. And lastly, we want to provide quick access to the information that's necessary. So our website is pretty simple to navigate. We bucket things into 3 different groups. One is estate preparation and organization. You can come and learn what information you need to gather together so your family has that access to the most critical information. And that's family member information. That includes your pets. We actually worked with veterinarians to create our pet profiles. We were financial planners.
Oh, wow.
On the asset side, it's understanding it's in an identification background, your career and education history. There was a story that I heard yesterday of someone who left a company. He still had benefits from that company, and they were in his ex-wife's name. So he passed away, and the current wife had to call up the ex-wife and explain what was going on. And fortunately, the ex-wife said, yes, I understand this isn't something that is still supposed to go to me, and was nice to figure it out. But there's a lot of hiccups that you can run into. So it's career education, it's residential history that helps you find unclaimed property. We have all of the databases available in the country for you to search for free. It's understanding your email and online accounts and your passwords, because unlocking that mystery is extremely important to get access to accounts. It's having an understanding of where your financial assets are, your financial liabilities, your business interests, if you have those, your insurance information, your tax returns. A lot of people don't realize you actually have to file a tax return after somebody passes away. And it's also included in your health and medical information and everything else that goes in between that. Our goal is do it yourself first, come to the site. We're going to give you the resources. But understanding what you need to find is very complicated. You've never done it before. And trust me, you don't want to learn on the job. The reason why, pretty simple. If I ask you, Christopher, to list out all of your bank accounts, you can probably do so in a matter of hours, right? You can go up, get your account statements, you can check your beneficiaries, you can check your account numbers. But if I asked your wife to figure out all of your accounts that you have, what does she have to do? She has to check your mail. She has to go to your computer. She has to contact the banks. You have to navigate the structure of, we can't talk to you yet because Christopher hasn't given you permission yet. So by taking the time to get all of this information early, it makes it easier. So if you don't want the do-it-yourself approach, we have products like the estate preparation package. It's been described as the most comprehensive estate organization system available, where if you take the time to fill it out, your family will literally have everything they need to step in to make sure that your wishes are carried out and it minimizes the stress and process. So that's some of the innovative things, but we can get into details if you want.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. A lot of really good things that you mentioned. You started with talking about putting people in the best position for when this happens, that they have access to their information. You mentioned, digital passwords, and, if you ask me what's changed in this space in the last 10 or 15 years or so, this wasn't a thing. We didn't have to worry about social media passwords or the ability for people to get online, getting locked out of your spouse's account. And then just the idea of it even being able to speak on that, if it's an individual style account and you haven't done what you needed to do. So making it easy, this tool that you're providing for them. You also mentioned that end of the year or the end of life taxes, like this is a way to put it. A lot of times people don't realize you get to file that last tax return if you're married, filing jointly, that's it. After the person passes, you get one shot at it. So a lot of these things that you just mentioned are really putting people in a position that they're able to get access to that information quickly and with intention and with thought there. Let's keep diving into this topic. What are the essential components of a comprehensive estate plan, and how does Buried in Work help ensure that those are thoroughly addressed?
Okay, so you are unique just like everybody else. That's one of my favorite statements. There's nobody that can say to you, this is the single thing that everybody needs. So take that with a grain of salt. If somebody says you need this, this, and this without actually speaking to you first, go find somebody else to speak to. Right. The foundational document in a comprehensive estate plan, in addition to organizing all the information that we've already spoken about, that oftentimes includes a will. So that is binding. It has to be adhering to the local jurisdiction's requirements that you reside in. So number of signatures or witnesses, the age of them, are they related to you? Is there a notary, whatnot? It's a holographic, not. You can have trusts as well. You can have things that are referred to such as advanced directives. And advanced directives are kind of interesting. It's an umbrella term for describing your preferences about how you want to live if you can't communicate them yourself. So some places, they're actual legal documents that the state, the jurisdiction you're in says, these are our advanced directives. And other times it's just a collection of documents. And those can include a living will, which is non-binding. It can include your healthcare proxy, your healthcare agent, a do not resuscitate, powers of attorney. What's interesting about powers of attorney is that those are documents that allow somebody to act on your behalf. They're not permanent. You can revoke them. You can have multiple people with them. But what happens there is you can have a financial power of attorney. This individual can act in domain over my financial. You can have a medical power of attorney. This person can make medical decisions for me. But what's really confusing about those is a lot of people believe, oh, I have power of attorney. I can do things after somebody passes away. Power of attorney, medical, financial, otherwise, immediately ends the second that that individual passes away. So it then goes into the probate or estate transfer process. You can have POLST, which are portable medical orders as well, and a whole host of other things. On top of that, for a truly comprehensive estate plan, you might want to have legacy messages, which are just non-binding messages of what you want to share with other people, or even something like an ethical will that is your ethos of what you care about in your heart of hearts that you want to share with other people. Now, there is no one size fit all. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the United States don't even have a will. So 2/3 of Americans don't have a will or trust. The good news is that is a very easy step and an easy process to go through to put one in place. It just makes things a little bit easier.
Adam, thank you for that. And one of the things you started with is that you're unique. Everybody has a different situation, right? So I feel like I need to say this so my compliance guy is not listening to this and having a heart attack. This is for educational purposes. It's not to substitute meeting with an attorney. However, I do feel very confident Adam is an attorney. And what he's just done is he shared kind of a laundry list of different legal documents that people can use. And as he mentioned, those things can all be different depending on the person's situation. And having something is always better than nothing. That's a pretty general thing we could say as well. And so I think that's awesome. We just shared a whole bunch of different things and how they interact with people in with their very specific situation. And you heard more than one, right? So the idea that, I got a buddy that did my simple will for me. Like, probably need to do a little bit deeper dive into that for sure. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let's just pivot a little bit because you mentioned this earlier. You talked about some of those demographics with baby boomers. With the baby boomers retiring and a significant wealth transfer underway, how should individuals and families prepare to manage those transitions effectively?
Okay, that's a great question. There is $84 trillion in assets, as mentioned earlier, about to shift over the next 20 years. The most important thing you can do is start having the conversation. It is very difficult for a lot of people to begin approaching their parents, approaching their spouse, approaching their kid about this topic. But if it goes unsaid, it goes undone. And we don't want that to happen. If you need help starting the conversation, come to our website, buriedinwork.com for the plug. We even have a quick quiz. It takes 2.5 minutes to complete. It'll help you get an understanding of how prepared you actually are. And what we found is that a lot of people are using that tool to then say, hey, I took this quiz. We got 4 out of 10. Maybe there are a few things that we should actually sit down and discuss. It's important that people in your family know what your plan is. Don't have to have details of it specifically, but they need to know if a plan exists, if a will exists, where it is located, who has the original copy. Is it in your office? Is it in a folder? Or do you keep it in your trunk of your car for some reason? Or is it with an attorney? Because the last thing you want to do is send people on a scavenger hunt when they're grieving. It is the worst time for them to do that.
Taking notes here. So that is a lot of really good information there. You talked about the $84 trillion of assets that are in play because of this generation that is aging and passing on the wealth there. And then the idea that people need to know about this, that difficult conversation doesn't have to be difficult. Part of it's just getting it started right. And you shared with us a tool, that quiz that you could go to your website and you could take it and it will get that you kind of primed to have that conversation with your loved ones, right? The idea that, just telegraphing or letting people know if you put them on there as an executor. I've had situations where the executor actually said, nope, not going to do it. Thanks, but no thanks. And appreciate the vote of confidence, but I'm not getting in the middle. So I've seen situations like that. So having that conversation and just you're not sharing everything, but letting that executor know that this is what our executor this is what we're thinking. Very, very important things here.
That's exactly right, Christopher. And the reality is that you can make a designation, but those designations, whoever is designated, they can decline. So it's better for them to have that opportunity to Say no. No, we don't want to make your will. We don't want to make your trust for you. But what we want to do is educate you so when you engage with a service provider, when you decide to do it yourself, you're in the best position possible. We even have games on the website that help you do that. So we've got 2 card games. One is called One More Story. So when somebody passes away, you lose all their legacy, you lose all their memories. So these are prompts to help you learn about them. Tell me one more story about the time that you were a child. Tell me one more story about when you were growing up in so-and-so. The other side of the equation is this more difficult conversation to start, and that's called Nothing Left Unsaid. So it takes our estate preparation package, and then it turns it into quick, digestible, phrase-based questions. Do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Do you have a guardianship? Where do you want to be buried? Do you have this? Do you have that? And just makes it easier. I can't stress enough. Just start the conversation and you'll be surprised what you learn. Just by starting, it'll get you much farther than where you might expect.
I know many families, there's a point of anxiety when you start talking about death, and it's just they have it in their head that it's a difficult thing to do. But my experience has been, once you go down that road, there's just like this heavy weight that's lifted, and it becomes not difficult, it just starts happening after you start. But the hard part is starting, right? So I love that you've given these resources and these tools for people to start that conversation, to get it going there. I want to talk about something that, you've mentioned before, shaking up traditional sectors like funeral planning. What are some outdated practices you believe need reform, and what are you proposing instead?
Yeah, I think that we need to start educating people a little bit more of what the process actually is. I'm a big supporter of green burial. I'm a big supporter of engaging with funeral providers, funeral homes early in the process. I think that far too often people have their first engagement when somebody is about to pass away. And we need to be digital first in a lot of ways. We have to be open about it. There needs to be less mysticism and confusion about what that process is. There are some legislations that are being proposed right now to make that a little bit easier on consumers, which will have some very positive impacts if they pass, but also probably some unintended consequences. But I think that we have to understand that there are options out there. So a lot of people aren't aware that you can have a home funeral if you want. That can save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. You have to understand what to do in that respect. A lot of people don't recognize that there are free resources available to help you get that foundational estate planning activity and estate organization activity completed. And they think that, a trust, a will is only something for my wealthy cousin to do, right? And the last thing is, people aren't starting early enough. If you get married, it's a life event. You should review your estate plan. If you have a baby, it's a life event. You should review your estate plan. If you get a new job, it's a life event. Review it. You need to take steps and take the time, because once you do that, things become just a little bit easier on everybody.
I love it. I love it. A lot of things that people, need to be thinking about. We're not doing this early enough, right? We're not having that conversation. We're waiting to the last minute where we're, grieving really. And, I think of that movie, The Big Lebowski, where he's sitting there, just because we're bereaved, we're not suckers. That's the first thing that pops into my head. And we've done shows before on green burial, and I think that's a fantastic idea. A lot of people don't even have that on their radar as an option. So a lot of really, really good information that you just shared with people, and the idea of kind of getting ahead of it before they're in a position where they're having to make a decision on the fly there. We've got just about 10 minutes or so here before the end of the show. So I want to keep going about technology, right? Because that's your platform is based on technology. How does technology enhance the estate planning process at Buried in Work? And what future innovations are you excited about?
Oh, this is great. I love it. We are a technology first company, but not necessarily in the way that a lot of people associate with online platforms. We have deliberately not created a SaaS offering, software as a service, where people can go in and type in all of their information and have it saved online. And the reason why is, time and time again, I have seen people say, the files are in the computer. And it goes back to Zoolander if you're a fan of movies. Picking a file, a computer up over there, and slamming it on the ground, looking for the files. If you put all your files in the computer and tell somebody to go to the computer and find it, odds are that person is never going to find those files. So what we do is provide our documentation online for people to read. The estate preparation package and checklists and guides, you can print them out if you want and fill them out by hand. We send a PDF or multiple PDFs, interactive and print optimized for the estate preparation package if you'd like to complete it by hand. But we're not providing an online system right now. We don't think that's the right way because it's not what people want. It's not what people actually use. On the other hand, we are using technology to make things easier. So an example is we have guides, and I'm actually going to go to the website real quick to load up how many we have. We add them quite often, more like 20, 30 guides and facts and whatnot. One of them, the funeral end-of-life tradition guide for navigating Christian funerals, Hindu funerals, end-of-life traditions, Jewish, LGBTQ+, Muslim, secular. And then we've taken those guides, we've imported them into ChatGPT. So instead of reading through things, you now can have a conversation, either type or voice if you have that option, based on our guide. So what we're trying to do is create a knowledge base and a resource base that anybody can use. And then we're going to meet you how you want to use that technology. And I think other companies do that too, if possible.
I love that. I love that because that sounds like the best of both worlds there. You're using, the information that you have available, those guides, and it sounded like there was a whole bunch of different stuff there, but where people can actually have conversations with them, where they're interacting with them. But on the other side, the idea that, when stuff happens, it's not necessarily the case that people are going to log in and look for stuff online. And the idea of having those either hard copies or this really organized way of accessing it, I think is a really good way to do that. When I hear the SaaS software, that's so popular right now. I almost think of it like a multi-level marketing scheme. I know that it's legitimized. It's not that, but I'm such a big skeptic. I see a whole bunch of business models off of that. So I like that it's not like that. So everyone.
Everything that we do goes through a mom filter. And I love my mom. She's absolutely wonderful, but she's probably not the person you want to go to for advice on how to use. She's mad at me for saying that. Sorry, Mom. But the reality is that she can take one of our binders and she can fill it out by hand. If she had to, she could put a USB drive in and she can fill it out and hit save and email that to me if I needed it. She's not going to want to walk around the house with an app and take pictures of things. It's just not what she's going to want to do. Meet the people where they are. If you have parents who are over 65 and they're not tech versed, you can sit down with them and go through these materials and they're going to understand it. It's very different when you say, go and fill this out on the computer, figure it out on your own. Like it's a world of hurt that we don't want to impose on people.
Yeah, I love that. That's all levels of digital literacy. They are meeting them where they're at. And I love that as an idea there. We're right here towards the end of the show. For listeners thinking about starting their estate planning, what first steps do you recommend that they take to get on the right path?
Okay. First thing is you need to start organizing your information. If you go to an estate planning attorney or you try and make a will, if you don't understand what you have, it's going to be very difficult to create that first foundational element for you. Now, in America, depending on what state you're in and who you go to, an estate planning lawyer is going to cost you between $150 to $400 an hour. A initial comprehensive estate plan basic is probably going to run you $1,500 to $5,000, right? But if you have all your information organized, like what we help you do in the estate preparation package, or yourself, if you're do-it-yourselfer, you can reduce those billable hours. So the first thing is understand what assets you have, what liabilities you have, what's in your estate. So then when you decide to take the next step on your own or go to a service professional, they have the information that they need. The analogy is you don't start baking a cake before you get your ingredients, right? You need to get your ingredients, then you bake the cake. So there is a step process order that you need to go through.
I love it. I love it. And that is going to shave hours off of that process. Even if you're a do-it-yourselfer, but you hire an attorney to go back and do a second set of eyes just to review to make sure you did your job right. Even in that situation, being prepared, you're going to make less mistakes, less billable hours there. So that's That is great advice. We are right here at the end of the show. Adam, thank you so much for coming on today. What have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners today?
All right, I think that there's one important takeaway. That is, you have to start somewhere. If you don't start somewhere, the government is going to decide for you. That process is called intestate. So if you pass away and you don't have a will, guess what? There is a process in the state where you live that the court will designate who that administrator is or who your representative is. So get started. Don't leave it up to somebody else. Even if you have very little bit, it's a foundation that you can always update later.
I love it. Adam, thank you so much. For listeners who'd like to find out more, what is a good place for them to go?
Buriedinwork.com. It's a bit punny, but easy to remember.
I love it. I love it. Adam, thank you so much for being on the show today. Have a good rest of the day there.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Chris.